Hello and welcome to another episode of Charles Weekly Party. I'm Charles, and before we get started, let's roll the intro. Alright, so this will be episode. What is it? Well, should have said this before the intro, but here we are. This is episode 2111. So, in case you haven't figured out the scheme, this is the first season, but this is episode 11, and I decided to do the year number as the season number to make my life simple and make episode numbers a little bit more creative. So subtract 20 from the season number and you'll get the number of seasons that are actually in progress. So now this is going to be very likely a slightly shorter episode. However, doesn't mean that I don't have a few things to talk about today. So, as per usual, I like getting started by talking about something involving architecture. And today I'm going to talk about the Lazy Bear Pool House. So the Lazy Bear Pool House was designed by Barlas Wedwick, and it's located in the Catskill Mountains. Now, what's special about this house is that it was built to sort of house the... it was built as an addition to a house, but a connected one, so it could be a separate building without detracting from the uniqueness of the primary house it's connected to, and doing that with a passageway. But it's what I like to consider an indoor-outdoor pool house, because yes, the pool is located inside of the pool house, and there's a door that leads outside, but it has an 18-foot curtain wall. And for those of you who are not as familiar with architecture, a curtain wall is a sort of I guess the best way to put it is it's a non-standard wall. So, standard wall being a brick wall, cinder brick wall, or a sort of drywall on studs. Basically, any traditional solid wall form that you might use. And I'm not saying that a curtain wall has to be glass. It's the best way to put it is it's a non-traditional wall. So you have an 18-foot high lower portion of curtain walls, and the rest of the walls inside utilize a sort of wooden, what's the word for it? Utilize a wooden interior, wooden wall and ceiling design and column design. So with all of that taken into account, I'll elaborate on that a little bit more later. The focus of the curtain wall is to really connect the inside and the outside. Because outside pools have their own problems, so having an indoor pool can help solve a couple of those issues and make your life a little bit better to some degree. Now, that's not to say that everyone can pull off an indoor pool, because you need to construct your own little extra structure for it. So, thought putting an addition up was bad. Well, when you put in an addition that happens to hold a boatload of water, that gets a little bit more interesting. So this sort of this pool house connects to, what's the word for it? Connects to the main house via a underground passageway. So what the underground passageway does is allows the two seemingly independent structures to actually be joined together without requiring a very apparent connection. So if you get what I'm saying about that, then it allows you to have, for lack of better words, having the Lazy Bear pool house here to have a completely different architectural style from the main house it's connected to without detracting from it. So if the two were more apparently connected, there would be a couple of questions rising up. Having that little level of separation there is separation but connection is really what helps pull it off. So taking that little underground passageway also has an airtight nature to it. So what the airtight nature does is it allows the pool house year-round to stay at about 88 degrees, which is about 20 degrees too warm for my liking. But obviously it's not my pool house, so I'm not terribly worried about that. To each their own. If you want to have Florida weather in your house in the Catskill Mountains, go for it. So it's very interesting the way it's put together. So when I mentioned that they have two sort of different architectural styles, the main house, I guess the best way to put it is it's really a combination of sort of wood and glass, from the views that I saw of it. But the Lazy Bear pool house almost looks a little bit like a barn. So basically having from the exterior view, having a concrete lower portion and a red siding upper portion with a metal roof to provide the level of protection needed for having that in the Catskills. So, So taking those little things in, the overall unique design approach. So from the inside perspective, I mentioned that it's basically all wood grain. The columns supporting the roof basically look like tree trunks. The walls have a lot of are clad in birch logs. So I'm not talking about really thick birch logs. I'm talking about mediocre thickness or diameter birch logs. And even the ceiling of it has its own, or has wood grain to it as well. So basically you get a whole ton of wood grain perspective, and then the two things that sort of separate from that trend are the pool itself and the windows. And what that allows is for the pool, from any perspective that you take, the pool's reflection carries the rest of the architecture of the pool house with it. So, what that means is that you have a continuation of whatever wall you're looking at given to you from the pool. So, if you're looking at the wall with the windows and the back wall, you'll sort of see that wall of the windows continuing down into the pool. So, basically making the pool look like a gigantic mirror, which I still think is pretty special. And that continues on for whichever wall you're looking at. So the birch logs seem to continue into the pool and all that fun stuff. But what most stood out to me was the fact that standing inside, you feel almost as if you're inside of a tree, looking out into the world with the green grass and the green trees around. So, I think what it really does is allows a unique perspective of almost being inside of nature, looking out at the rest of it. So, making the building seem like it's not necessarily a building that you're in, but more so that you're just looking at it almost feels like you're in a tree house that's in a tree basically in whatever tree you'd like it to be in, looking out at the rest of nature. So I think taking all that into account, it's definitely nice, and I'd love to see what the inside of the house that's connected to it looks like, because the pool house just really sets the bar pretty high. Now, for the technology side of things, and as much as I might like to talk about some of the technology utilized in the pool house, which there actually is, you have a very carefully calibrated ventilation system in the ceiling that goes and makes sure that that 18-foot high wall of windows that's there doesn't fog up from the 88-degree heat. So, what I'm going to talk about on the technology side are two things that I feel are very important from what I've seen. So, to start off on a note that probably affects almost everyone running a Windows computer, AMD and Intel have a vulnerability that's been discovered affecting, I believe, the vast majority of their chips. Not 100% sure on the exact scope of the issue, but I know it's quite a few processors. And before you get too worried about the vulnerability, it's being heavily looked into by both of the chip manufacturers. However, and part of the reason for that is because the issue can actually cause or lead to severe problems if someone were able to exploit it. However, that's a very big if. So, here's where it gets interesting. The special thing about the vulnerability is that you need to, in essence, have direct access to the chip to exploit it. So, to make a long story short, you need to get past every single defense that the computer has in order to actually exploit it. Now, you may think, oh, it just needs to get past my antivirus. Not exactly. So, your antivirus has one job, trying to make sure that your system stays clean of stuff. And keeping an eye on everything. However, that's not its only job. Or that's not the only thing that you're thinking about. Windows has in it, and every other operating system for that matter, has a firewall. And to further that, whatever network you're connected to will have a firewall. Either if it's in your home network, you'd have a small grade firewall on your router. And you'd have or if you're tech savvy enough, you could have your own firewall hooked up to everything. But there's bound to be yet another firewall located with your ISP. But long story short, if you were to try and forcibly access something else or something, you'd need to properly get access to the computer. So assuming you bypass the other firewall so that you're down to the computer level, now you need to go and compromise a whole ton of operating system security features to try and get down to the base level, which is not very easy. Sure, there are ways to do it, but even from a traditional malware perspective, you'd need to have pretty clear access to be able to pull it off. So that's where it all gets fun. So the best way to put it is, as long as you maintain a relative degree of intelligence while operating your computer, you should be fine. All right? No need to, and unless you are head of a multi-billion-dollar company, it's very unlikely that someone's going to try and hack your home network. When I say multi-billion, I mean something that could be used, something that could provide gain for someone else. Obviously, no one's going to hack or take the time and resources to hack into a computer if the only benefit is they get to say, hey, I hacked this. No, you do it for one purpose or another, not just for the heck of it. Now, that's one thing. The other thing I'd really, really like to talk about, at the very least briefly, is in regards to the Apple versus Epic lawsuit. So, if you are at all following up on the technology world, you're probably already aware of this. And this has been in the making for a while, but now the trial's actually happening. So, the long story short version is Epic is accusing Apple of running its App Store as a monopoly. Alright? And the basis for the claim is where it gets interesting. So Epic's basis is that, for starters, if you own an Apple device, so, or an Apple mobile device specifically, so an iPad running iPadOS or an iPhone or iPod Touch running iOS, you end up, if you want to get an app on it, you need to get the app from the App Store. And this is in a degree of contrast to the what's the name for it? This is in a stark degree of contrast to the Macintosh, which you can download and install apps on your own. So going to a website, easiest example is installing a web browser. When you go and download the web browser that's not Safari, which everyone will inevitably do on their Mac, you can go to a different website, download the browser, and install it on the computer. And boom, now you have another browser. And you didn't even need to run it through Apple to say, ooh, is it okay if I download this for this? No, you can download that. Which also means you can download other versions of malware, but that's its whole other thing. And that's where Apple's side of the stand ends up being. But going back to the iPads and the iPhones and the iPod Touches, you're only able to use the App Store on it. Now, I'm sure Epic wouldn't be as concerned about it if Apple didn't require that all apps on the App Store use their in-app payment method. So, what's special about the in-app payment method is that if you do purchase something in-app, it's subject to a 30% commission. So, if you've ever wondered why your favorite retailers don't just go and use in-app payments, that's because if you buy $10 worth of merchandise, $3 of those dollars would end up going to Apple for the in-app purchases. So, that's a little bit of a fun fact. So, the sore spot for Epic ends up being that I think I saw the statistic. I do not know I don't know 100% of the details on it. But out of I think out of 72 billion that was brought in from Fortnite, I don't know if that's exclusive to iOS and iPadOS or if that was across all the mobile devices. But out of $72 billion, $22 billion went to Apple from Fortnite. And I can say right now, 22 billion is not a small number. Not a small number at all. And what really gets interesting is that Epic is estimating that the profit margin on Apple's App Store is about 78%. So basically, they don't need all of the commission money that they get. So Apple has argued that the 30% was a standard fee used across several different app stores. And to some degree that's correct, but the initiation of the 30% piece dates back to when software was actually provided in a box. That's right. When software came in a box, you bought a box with a disk in it, and you put the disk into your computer to install the software. And that 30% covered the royalties to whomever was running the operations and provided the funds required to store and maintain those boxes of software. So that's where that piece really comes from. So to some degree, the trial's actually been somewhat entertaining because we're getting revelations about each little piece of the of both sides. So learning about how much different sides brought in. But of all of the interesting things, I think one of the interesting elements was when Epic mentioned that estimate for 78% of a profit margin. I think Apple went and said something along the lines of, "Okay, that's not true. That's not true, but at the same time, don't go blabbing it out there, trying not to let it leak out into the public knowledge." So, if you're at all familiar with the Streisand effect, basically saying the more you try and draw attention away from something, it's, if you've ever heard of the Streisand effect, it's basically a principle of, if you try and someone tries to draw attention away from something, inadvertently draws it straight to it. So a sort of analogy to that would be if you walked in with a present for your significant other, who happens to come straight down the hallway towards you. Instead of having an opaque bag next to you, you put the opaque bag behind your back, which becomes apparent that you have something behind your back that you're hiding, which, instead of drawing attention away from the fact that you have a bag, it draws attention to the fact that you have a bag, when that's, in reality, the exact opposite of what you wanted to do. So it'll be interesting to see how much information we find out about both Apple and Epic throughout the scope of this lawsuit, for which both sides waived the right to a jury trial, which means that only one judge, Yvonne Gonzalez Rogers, gets to decide how this turns out for Apple and Epic. And for the record, Epic's not trying to claim monetary damages. They just want to have the way Apple's system works changed, to basically allow its own app store within it. So I guess the tricky part ends up being, what are the pluses and the minuses, right? So there are quite a few people who are easily fooled by phishing attacks, and if you fall for one, you can end up downloading or otherwise installing malicious code onto your computer. So Apple's goal is, in theory, to try and prevent that from happening on one of the mobile devices, by saying, if you have to run the app through our approval system to make sure that that the app is most likely not full of malware. And I think there's a list of 4,000 apps that, through an additional copy of Xcode that was available on Chinese servers, managed to go and affect over 100 million people with malware on their devices that allowed remote access, and Apple was kind enough not to give a heads up that had actually happened, which I'm not a big fan of. So the tricky part is balancing that Apple needs, by offering the App Store as a service, obviously that costs them a little bit of money. However, offering that service and acting as a sort of gatekeeper also means that it's a lot less likely that you'll download an app that has malware in it. So figuring out where the middle ground is really the key here. Now, last but not least, the question that this really sort of alludes to is to what degree is it your device if you can't just put any application that you want on it? If you want to play Fortnite, but you can't because Apple isn't allowing it on the App Store, then how does that work for you? If you can't get the device because Apple doesn't, or if you can't get the application because Apple doesn't want to let it on there, that's where it gets tricky. So, in that case, is what Apple wants for you really what you want for you? So, begging the question of how much of your device do you actually own? As interesting as that question is, though, it'll have to wait for a future episode of Charles Weekly Party because I could talk about that for a while. So, this was a little bit of a shorter episode, but I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, definitely be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening to this, or if you're watching it on YouTube. And also, if you're watching it on YouTube, you probably noticed the lighting's a little bit different. I'm trying something new out this week, so we'll see how it turns out. But if you want to interact with the podcast, you can leave a review on Apple Podcasts or go to anchor.fm/Charles Weekly Party, and from there you can leave a voice message, or you can go and support the podcast, as well as finding links to your favorite podcast platforms and all the past episodes of Charles Weekly Party. So, I guess my party for the week, well, personally, I'm going to try and get a little bit of a balance of relaxation in. I guess the party is enjoy the rhythm, or lack thereof, that you have in your life. Sometimes you got a steady beat going, and other times you just got to let the drum beat how it will. So, take care, have a good week, kick it back, and if you're in America, just a reminder, by the time you're listening to the next episode of Charles Weekly Party, you should have your taxes submitted. So, on that happy note, take care, and let's roll the outro.